It's the end of days. The sun scorches the earth, and strange beings, things wearing the faces of humans, crawl up from beneath it. The searing heat traps us indoors by day, and these visitors keep us imprisoned by night. We have no choice but to stay inside, but we can't stay alone, for that is when they strike. So who do we trust? Who do we let inside our homes? In a world ruled only by dogs, will we become one of them just to survive? This is the story of No, I'm Not a Human, a story that makes you question your morality, your humanity, and your very existence. This video is sponsored by War Thunder. The game opens with the protagonist speaking to his neighbor over the phone. He has just returned from a trip and seems to be concerned about something. During their conversation, several key figures from the story briefly appear on screen. A long-haired man buried in research, a bald man lying face down on a beach, a strange woman with a cat, the neighbor's daughter, and a pale figure lurking in the shadows. Later that night, our neighbor visits our home in person. He says that something terrible is approaching. According to the news, 2 strange phenomena have been reported: unusual disturbances from the sun, and people emerging from underground, known as visitors. Our neighbor admits he doesn't fully understand what's happening, but fears the sun could explode, and believes these people are called visitors because they try to enter others' homes. He warns that being alone has become dangerous, and insists on staying the night to ensure our safety. We agree and head to bed, our mind clouded with worry. Morning breaks with a blaring news report. Earlier today, a powerful burst of solar energy erupted from the sun, far stronger than anything scientists anticipated. Temperatures have climbed to critical levels, forcing the government to declare a state of emergency and urge everyone to stay indoors during the day. On the radio, a chilling voice describes people being burned alive beneath the sunlight, as well as a figure haunting the streets at night. The pale one. He isn't human, the person warns. Exploring the house of the protagonist reveals fragments of a troubled past. The details remain vague, but this place carries memories steeped in bitterness. His father, who died 15 years ago, seems to have raised him harshly. The protagonist recalls how his father didn't give a damn for rules and left him with little more than a single toy throughout childhood. In the office, and besides the telephone, framed photos of a blonde woman can be found, likely our character's former partner. He mutters that he's better off alone, claiming that speaking to himself is more than enough for company. The man is clearly an introvert, possibly to the point of detriment. He wishes that people would just leave him alone, and even fantasizes about loneliness and isolation, though this may very well be a subtle cry for help. A quiet yearning disguised as contentment. In the kitchen, our neighbor sits beside a pack of beer, lamenting about the chaos outside. He urges us to open the door to those seeking refuge, explaining that his cousin warned him to never stay alone. If anyone asks whether you're alone, he insists, say no. The reasoning remains unclear, but his concern feels genuine. He even invites us to join his family if evacuation ever becomes necessary. In this dying world, our neighbor may be the only person we can rely on. As the sun sets, our neighbor's daughter arrives at our door. She's understandably shaken by everything that's happening and begs for her father to come home. Before leaving, he gives us his phone number and bids farewell. The streets are eerily silent tonight, empty except for a few rebellious teenagers. The stillness is surreal, almost dreamlike, but then a sudden knock breaks through it. Our first guest stands at the door, too tall to see through the peephole. The man claims he was kicked out of a bar following a disagreement, and now needs a place to stay. His size and manner are intimidating, and he's not the most polite fellow, but we can't afford to stay alone. As he kneels, his face softens, a surprisingly kind expression. Let's hope it isn't just a facade. Next comes a redhead woman with a disfigured frame, a former cashier. She stumbles over her words, trembling as she explains that visitors invaded her home, forcing her to flee. The woman now has nowhere to go. We let her in. She seems desperate, and perhaps we could learn more about these visitors from her encounter. Our final guest for the night is an older man, a gravedigger. He recounts a chilling story. While preparing a burial, his shovel struck something solid beneath the ground. Then from the soil, a hand reached up. A visitor. Seems like these things aren't just rumors. We let the man in, eager to question him more in the morning. It doesn't seem like anyone else is coming tonight. Time for bed. The sun grows more violent with each passing day, its activity pushing global temperatures beyond every recorded limit. But heat isn't the only thing rising. Crime too has reached unprecedented levels. Murders surge across the city, driven by the growing paranoia surrounding visitors. Eyewitnesses describe these beings as creatures capable of imitating human appearance and behavior, but according to early reports, one detail seems to set them apart: perfect white teeth. A strange claim. Surely good dental hygiene can't make someone not a human. Still, it's the only clue we have, and so we begin our checks. The tall man and the gravedigger both pass without issue, the former with stained teeth, and the latter missing a few entirely. But the cashier, well, her teeth are damn near perfect. She insists that she must have had them fixed, though she can't quite recall visiting a dentist. Her memory is hazy after the incident at her house. It's suspicious, but killing someone over their teeth feels unthinkable, especially since ours are just as perfect. We call our neighbor for advice. He's taken in a few guests of his own and warns us not to act impulsively. It's best not to jump to conclusions, he says. And he's right. Hysteria could be deadlier than the visitors themselves. Questioning the woman about her encounter with the visitors, she describes the day she was fired. Upon returning home, she noticed several pairs of unfamiliar boots by the entrance. At first, she just assumed her roommate had company, but as she walked upstairs, strange noises drifted from the bedroom. Peering through the doorway, she saw her roommate lying motionless on the bed, and then felt a rough hand grab her from behind. A filthy man whispered that her roommate wasn't feeling well, and whatever happened next left her deeply shaken. She refuses to speak any further today. Before returning to our room for some rest, the gravedigger shares another chilling story. A while back, before everything started going downhill, he had been preparing a new grave at the cemetery, but when the man returned to exhume the old coffin, the burial site was empty. The body had vanished without a trace, the dead returning to life. It sounds impossible, yet something in the gravedigger's voice tells us he's certain. Later that night, we see our neighbor playing with his daughter through the window. A bit risky given everything that's going on, but it's still nice to see a semblance of normality in this nightmare. Though the calm quickly fades when we notice the lifeless bodies of the teenagers from the night before. Someone killed them, viciously and mercilessly, and it looks like we found the culprit. A man as pale as death itself. He must be the one they mentioned on the radio. There are strange folds in his skin. It's as though his flesh is the wrong size for his body. We can feel him staring straight at us, like a predator stalking his prey. Let's just hope he leaves soon. The first to arrive at our door tonight is a disheveled, heavyset man. His shirt clings to him, soaked with sweat and other stains, and his thoughts ramble on without logic or reason. To him, this crisis is divine judgment, a final reckoning for humanity, from the sun no less, which he believes to be some sort of sentient being, cleansing the world of sin. Like many in times of fear, he has built his own twisted faith around the chaos. Still, he appears harmless enough, and only seeks to drown his worries in drink. Next comes an older bearded man. He speaks coldly and plainly. The visitors are varmint, he says, wild animals that need to be wiped out. House after house they go and tear people apart. They cannot be allowed to live. His anger is understandable, especially since he himself was nearly a victim. We let him in. Any information about the visitors could prove valuable. Last for the night is a soft-spoken man wearing a remarkably thick coat. Despite the almost unbearable heat, he claims to be unbothered by it. On the contrary, he says he's freezing. Unusual for sure, but aside from that, he doesn't immediately raise any alarm bells. We might as well let him stay a while. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. War Thunder is a free-to-play, fully comprehensive vehicle combat game available on PC, consoles, and mobile. It features over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, ranging from 1920s biplanes and armored cars to modern jets and battle tanks. Battles feel incredibly immersive thanks to the detailed hitboxes, realistic damage modeling, and full vehicle customization, all running smoothly even on low-end machines. Join a global community of over 95 million players and play War Thunder today for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile using the links in the pinned comment or description. For a limited time only, new and returning PC or console players who haven't played in the last 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack, including premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor Decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. With the anomalous heat and invasion of visitors showing no signs of slowing, the government has formed a new organization to address the situation, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA for short. Merely days after forming, they have already identified a new sign for visitors: dirt under their fingernails. Specialists say this helps identify visitors who have crawled out from underground. Something feels off about this organization. They say they have only been in operation for a few days, but have somehow already identified over 27,000 dangerous anomalies. That number doesn't seem physically possible, especially for a brand new group with no established infrastructure. In any case, the news goes on, reporting about a pale maniac creating havoc in the city. All his victims had one thing in common: they were all alone. Could this be what our neighbor was worried about? The maniac is described as a very pale middle-aged man with black hair. He only wears a pair of pants and has a habit of talking to his victims before viciously murdering them. This is undoubtedly the same man we saw outside our window last night, and it would seem that he has now set his sights on us. We need to be careful. But for now, there's a more immediate problem. Someone was killed during the night. The gravedigger. There's a visitor among us. We begin our checks. The bearded man's teeth are clear, though his nails are caked with dirt. The man in the coat has perfect teeth, but most of his fingernails are missing. Both the tall man and the sun worshipper are clear on both counts, but the former voices his doubts about these tests, pointing out that a human could simply have had dental work done or soil on their hands from working in the garden, and a visitor could just as easily wash their hands or purposefully stain their teeth. He is right. None of this feels particularly reliable. But one thing's for certain: the cashier has both dirt under her fingernails and perfect teeth. The only one in the house with both signs, including ourselves. She insists she hasn't touched soil recently, which is strange. If she truly was a bloodthirsty visitor, why wouldn't she just lie or invent an excuse? Could the trauma from the incident at her house be affecting her memory? Whatever the reason, the fact remains that someone died here last night, and if FEMA is to be believed, she's the most likely culprit. But can we really kill someone based on what we heard on the television? It feels absurd. If we're wrong, that would make us a murderer, no better than the visitors we fear. The thought alone makes us lower the gun. The cashier takes a deep breath and finally tells the rest of her story. After being dragged into the kitchen, another man entered the room and blocked the door. They began touching her, and in the background, she could hear the laughter of the other men in the house. Frozen with terror, she stayed still until one of them went to the fridge. That was her only chance. She bolted for the door and ran until her legs gave out, eventually collapsing to the ground. Her memory after that is hazy, scattered, and she doesn't know why. She begins to question if she herself is a visitor and looks to us for assurance. But the truth is, we don't know. We try calling FEMA's hotline for guidance, but they aren't much help. Just a voice reading generic advice from a script. Over the radio, we hear an advertisement from a so-called psychic agency claiming they can help us deal with the visitors. It's almost certainly a scam, but desperation makes us call the number. They ramble on about how a visitor spirit has possessed our body and instruct us to leave a slice of bread out as an offering, the usual mumbo jumbo. But then they ask something unusual. Do we consume mushrooms? We answer no. The only fungus we consume is kombucha. In fact, it's our character's favorite drink. The psychic on the phone then warns us to stop immediately, claiming that kombucha allows strands of mycelium to grow inside the body, letting spirits control us like puppets. They say it can also erase memories, or force us to relive them again and again, changing our choices each time. At first, it just sounds like nonsense, but starts to make sense when you take into account that drinking kombucha is our method of saving the game, essentially allowing us to relive moments and alter our decisions. Maybe it's just a playful fourth wall break, or maybe there's more to it than we realize. Speaking to the bearded man, we learn that he is a ranger who previously lived out in the woods, but was forced to flee following an encounter with a tall, pale visitor. He actually came face to face with that monster and made it out alive, but he isn't willing to share any more details just yet. We'll have to wait until tomorrow. In the middle of the night, we are awoken by violent knocking at our door. It's loud, louder than anything before. Each strike rattles the doorframe, and for a moment, it feels as though the hinges might give way.
Howdy.
It's him, a man as pale as a carcass drained of all its blood, wearing an unsettling grin.
Spacious house you've got yourself here. I like it.
We warn the man that we have a gun, but he doesn't seem intimidated at all. If anything, he seems excited.
Delicious. Despair gives courage to the coward, yes? So, you alone?
At this point, we can trigger one of the game's endings. If we happen to be alone when the pale man arrives, he will break down the door and kill us. What's interesting though, is that the same fate awaits us if we lie. If we tell him we're alone, even when others are inside. There's clearly a deeper meaning here, but we'll get into that a bit later. In the cutscene that follows this ending, we learn that after the protagonist died, none of his relatives ever came to visit or collect his belongings. Not a single one. This suggests that he's been completely estranged from his family, either by his choice or theirs. The narration reflects on how quickly people are forgotten after they die, how easily their presence fades from memory. Perhaps it mirrors the thoughts of the protagonist, his quiet fear of being erased from the world entirely. In any case, in order to survive the encounter, we must tell the pale man the truth, that we are not alone.
It's your lucky day. I can hear someone whispering inside, but who knows where they'll be in a few days.
The visitor vanishes without a trace, but something tells us this won't be the last time we see him. Not long after the pale man leaves, a strange bald man appears at our door, the same one we saw lying on the beach during the opening. He speaks to us as though we've met before, though we're certain this is our first encounter. Without explanation, he asks us to tell his fortune by choosing a page from his book. We flip somewhere near the beginning. The passage reads, "The dead soon shall speak, but none will heed their words." It's shockingly relevant, the man says, obviously drawing a connection to the visitors. But what is it they are trying to say? So far, all they've done is kill. Before leaving, The bald man tells us he came here for a reason, to deliver a message. Events will soon begin to unfold, he warns, and as strange as it may sound, we must let the cat enter. He doesn't elaborate, only assuring us that doing so will be in our best interest. Very mysterious, much like our supposed saviors FEMA, who have now made their way to our neighborhood. They seem to be investigating the area, along with the bodies of those teenagers which have now been burnt to a crisp. With them, they have brought a small squad of armed soldiers. Let's hope they can take care of that pale freak while they're here. The next morning, we learn why FEMA has moved into the city. They're setting up quarantine zones to detain potentially dangerous suspects. The agency has also found another sign through their experiments: blood red eyes. We begin the checks. Another death under our watch. The sun worshipper. We have to take action. We cannot continue to sit idle while innocents die. Opening the storage room door, the cashier recoils in fear. She has grown suspicious of us and suspects that we are a visitor. But according to FEMA, we only have one sign. The cashier, on the other hand, is now 3 for 3. We can't take any more chances, even if it means staining our hands with blood. As we pull out our shotgun, the cashier becomes hysterical. She says that death is calling and proposes that perhaps the visitors are a force for good, for they bring us all closer to death, a state in which everyone is equal. She's clearly lost her mind, but in her last few sentences, she finally admits that she is in fact a visitor, a twisted reflection of a human, one side of the same coin. We just killed a person, or rather something pretending to be one. Still, it doesn't feel good. We might have shot right today, but what if next time we are not so lucky? The tall man once again criticizes FEMA's findings. Every day is more ridiculous than the last, he says. What if someone hadn't slept, or was crying? Would that make them a visitor? It's true. If we go around killing based on these signs alone, we will undoubtedly end up killing innocents. We will undoubtedly become a murderer, and that's another of the game's endings. If we let our paranoia get the best of us and begin killing irrationally, the bald prophet will pay us a visit, stating that fear has blinded us. A cutscene then plays. Grasping hands claw their way out from our character's basement, shadows of a past he keeps buried. Unable to cope with the weight of our actions, we then place the barrel of the shotgun beneath our chin. But before we can pull the trigger, the other guests in our house throw us out and beat us within an inch of our life. They leave our broken body in the fields, letting the sun do the rest. We need to be careful who we kill, lest we end up another victim of the sun. Continuing our talk with the ranger, he cracks open a beer and begins to reminisce. One day, while staying at his cabin, a strange man appeared, pounding frantically at the door. The man was pale, as if he'd seen death itself. He begged to be let inside, but the ranger refused. There was no telling what danger followed him, and the ranger wanted no part of it. He thought that was the end of it, until a few days later. Returning home after collecting some firewood, he noticed his rifle was missing. Then he saw him. Outside the window stood the same man, now clutching the weapon. But something had changed. He was taller, his skin hung loose over his flesh, and most of his clothes were gone. Then, without saying a word, the pale man raised up the ranger's rifle and snapped it in half as if it were a twig. But afterwards, instead of attacking, he just stood there and watched until dawn drove him away. The ranger has no idea why he was spared, but regards this as the most unsettling experience of his life. We now know that even that pale monster was once a human, but is clearly different from the others. Far more sadistic, far more terrifying. There's definitely something more to him. Before laying down for a bit, we decide to call our neighbor. He sounds shaken, telling us that he had a run-in with FEMA last night. They apparently came to his house and took someone away for unspecified tests. He too is growing suspicious of them and feels like they aren't telling us everything. Our neighbor then makes a somber request of us. If something ever happens to him, he asks that we look after his daughter, and well, there's no way we could refuse that request. Later that night, we are awoken by the pungent smell of smoke. It's our neighbor's house. It's been set ablaze. Worried thoughts fill our mind. Who could have done this? Did they make it out alive? We check the other windows for answers and see the pale man smiling and holding the decapitated head of a soldier. He massacred the entire squadron FEMA brought with them. It's painfully obvious that he can kill us at any time he wants, but doesn't, which raises the question, why? The first to arrive at our door tonight is a FEMA agent. He wears a gas mask and a hazmat suit, which makes us wonder if we should be doing the same. The man assures us it isn't necessary, saying that they only wear it because they spend so much time outside. There's no telling what effect the sun's radiation may have, the man says. But that doesn't make sense. Standard hazmat suits aren't designed to protect you against solar radiation, and neither are gas masks. They are used to prevent exposure to biological and chemical contaminants. The man then asks if he can take someone from the house to run some tests. The more data they have, the quicker they can resolve the crisis, he says. We cast our doubts aside for now and comply. The FEMA agent takes the ranger and bids us farewell. Shortly after they leave, our neighbor's daughter comes running over with tears running down her face. We can barely understand her of all the sobbing, but it seems that her father was killed by visitors who then set their house on fire. His good nature got the best of him. If only he hadn't been so trusting. The girl isn't in any condition to talk further. We will ask her more about what happened tomorrow. Last to our door tonight is an odd woman holding a cat, another character from the intro. Her speech is disjointed, her body is oddly proportioned, and she wears an unsettling grin on her face. Every instinct in our body is telling us to send her away, but then we remember the bald prophet's words, the cat. We ask her if she knows him, to which she responds yes, but doesn't elaborate any further. It's glaringly obvious that she's not a human, and we even tell her so, but all she says in response is "so what?" Doesn't even try to deny it. We would be absolute fools to let her in, but something about that cat intrigues us. We wonder what fortune it may bring. Against all rationality, we let the woman in, though we may have just opened the door to death itself. Smells like someone died tonight. With the situation worsening by the day, FEMA has issued a quarantine across all major population areas. Travel outside the city is now prohibited. They now also suspect that the visitor phenomenon may be infectious, spread by an unidentified biological agent. That explains the protective gear they wear, though it's odd they previously lied about it and didn't tell us sooner. In any case, this revelation is deeply concerning, as it means that simply being in contact with a visitor may increase our chance of becoming one. In addition to all of this, they've identified yet another visitor sign, which seems to be a daily occurrence now. This time it's even more bizarre: hairless armpits. As we go to begin our checks, we find that the tall man has been killed, and there's no mystery about who did it. We resist the urge to pull out the shotgun and blow her brains out, and instead start questioning the monster. After some pushback, she admits that someone sent her here, and it wasn't the bald man. All she was told was to come to our house with the cat, nothing else. The only reason she hasn't killed us, she says, is because she wasn't ordered to. It's almost as if she has no will of her own. As we raise the gun, the woman eggs us on, saying that this is what she wants, that she will come, and that she never thought that she would favor us. This she must be the one who sent her. Shooting the gun, the woman distorts her body almost instantly to dodge the bullets. First her neck, then her torso, then her whole frame. She mocks our prowess with the weapon, but eventually accepts her fate, since she has not been allowed to fight back. Vermin. We slightly regret letting that thing into our house, but it was not entirely in vain. The cat she brought with her brushed aside a rug concealing a latch to the basement. Inside is a small area stocked with food, as well as a strange section filled with dirt and rubble that either collapsed or was destroyed long ago. It's odd that we were only able to come down here after the cat revealed the latch. The protagonist certainly knew about the basement beforehand, but perhaps for some reason he was trying to forget. In any case, there's not much we can do down here for now. On the radio, we hear an ad for a phone roulette service that supposedly matches callers with their ideal conversation partner. Feeling a bit lonely after the loss of our neighbor, we decide to give it a try. We're paired with someone who, like us, has no one they can really talk to. Before the quarantine was enforced, she fled her city for somewhere cooler, likely somewhere further from the equator. She's now in the middle of nowhere, but at least it's safe. Though for the longest time, no matter what she tried, she couldn't reach any of her loved ones, and the reason is now clear. The woman claims that the entire city's phone lines were cut off from the rest of the world, which makes you wonder what FEMA was trying to cover up over there. After lamenting about her family and an unspoken love, the woman turns her attention to us. The conversation is uncomfortable at first. The protagonist isn't used to talking about himself, but gradually, he begins to open up. He admits that he's lonely, that he hated his father, and that one day, he simply stopped being his son. He's no longer part of that family now, and all he has left of them is this house. A house he wishes had burned down long ago. Something happened between the protagonist and his father, something dark. This goes far beyond a harsh upbringing. The woman thanks us for talking to her and bids us farewell. After clearing the neighbor's daughter of all signs, we try to learn more about what happened with her father now that she's had some time to calm down. She tells us something deeply unsettling. After being attacked by the visitors, she says that while running away, she saw her father rise from the ground and walk out of the burning house. But last night, she had told us he was killed. We are not sure if this is just the rambling of a grieving child, but it could very well mean that her father has become a visitor. What would he do if he saw his daughter again? Would he still care for her? Or has the sickness stripped him of his humanity? The girl asks if we can invite her friend over to play, a bold request given the current state of the world. Still, it couldn't hurt to ask, and she could use the company. Calling the number she gave us, her friend's mother answers the phone. She's dead, the woman says flatly. We had to kill her. Her words take us back. She says that it had to be done, that her daughter had all the signs. Despicable. The world really has gone mad. The last person we have to check is the man in the coat. Inside his armpits, a fungal rash seems to be growing, but beneath it, there's definitely still hair. So based on what FEMA has told us so far, he's good. Though he's still clinging to that damn coat, sweating buckets underneath all that fabric. The man says that tomorrow, he'll finally share with us what he believes is the source of his coldness, and we'd be lying if we said we weren't curious. In the evening, we are visited by another FEMA agent, back for more test subjects. We ask about the ranger who they took last time, but all the man tells us is that he's still in quarantine and will only be sent back once the period is over. This time around, FEMA takes the neighbor's daughter. She screams and cries, but it's not like we have a say in the matter. It's probably for the best. She'll be safer with them. At least, that's what we tell ourselves. Before departing, the agent hands us a mandatory appearance slip to be given to anyone we suspect of being a visitor. Next time around, FEMA will take them off our hands. As we hang our head in shame, a vile aura begins to fill the air. He's back.
So, you're still holed up here, I see. What did you think of that guy? The one in the suit? Times are rough lately. Just one thing after another, am I right? But don't worry, everything's already been decided for us. A blessing, wouldn't you say? Or would you prefer to fix things yourself? But then again, what exactly can you do? Can you ward off death? Stop the floods, the fires, the decay? No. The only thing you can stop is a heartbeat. Listen, you alone?
The pale man's words cut deep. They almost seem to reflect our character's own thoughts, his doubts and internal conflicts.
Still scrambling to survive in this new world, are we? Why? Dogs rule the world now, and only dogs survive here. You understand what I mean, yes? Things will never go back to the way they were. Next time we meet, things will be interesting.
In a way, he's right. Even if the world somehow recovers, even if the sun goes back to normal and the visitors disappear, things will never be the same. The land will be stained with blood, and only the ruthless will endure. As we stand in contemplation, the bald prophet returns. But he looks different this time, gaunt, sickly even, though he seems pleased that we let the cat in, and says that a powerful entity awaits its approach. It is thanks to she that his eyes see far, the man says. Whoever this entity is, it must be the same she the cat lady spoke of, meaning both the prophet and the cat lady are her servants. The prophet warns that something wicked is coming our way. We are not the cause of it, he says, yet we will feel its wrath all the same. He advises us to listen carefully to the radio if we wish to learn more. Before leaving, the man gives us one final instruction. Refrain from testing anyone in the house for the next 2 days. If we obey, it may finally lead us to peace, or at least help us to move on. But if we don't, it will almost certainly lead to doom. It's a massive ask, one the protagonist is deeply skeptical of. The last time we listened to him, someone died. This time could be much worse. How are we to distinguish friend from foe without testing? How are we to take action if a visitor enters our home? It's out of the question. Lost for the night are 2 twin sisters seeking shelter. They claim to suffer from depression, with the younger sister almost completely dependent on the older. Nothing too out of the ordinary. And since one of the female agents said that visitors almost never travel in groups, it seems fairly safe to let them in. In the morning, we're awoken by another emergency broadcast. Wildfires are now sweeping across forested regions as solar activity continues to intensify. Firefighters have been deployed to contain the blazes, but things look bleak. As expected, FEMA has discovered another visitor sign, and it's undoubtedly the most absurd one yet. By using aura-sensitive photographic film, they claim we can expose the soul's energy and distinguish human from visitor. According to them, visitors tend to emit dark patches in these photographs. It sounds completely made up, and it doesn't help that AuraCam, the company behind the film, is sponsoring the broadcast while flashing 1 + 1 = 3 across the screen. Still, like a lost sheep, we begin our tests. The twins appear mostly clear, even by FEMA's new criteria. But the man in the coat, his photograph reveals a large pitch-black patch around his torso. But before we can question him about it, he says that he's ready to share his secret. It usually ends badly, he warns, but he thinks this time may be different. He tells us that life left his eyes long ago, that all he has left is endless solitude. He laments about his inability to grow close to anyone, claiming that connection only brings pain and suffering. Beneath his clothes, he says, lies what he believes to be the source of both his coldness and his loneliness. The man lifts up his shirt, revealing what can only be described as a black hole. Uncovering it causes everyone around him to die, except us. The man, or rather, the visitor, begins begging for his life. He swears it was an accident, that he didn't mean for this to happen. We should kill him. He's not human. But for some reason, we can't. He reminds the protagonist too much of himself. Still, he's far too dangerous to keep around. We tell him to leave as soon as the sun sets, and never come back. He thanks us, and yet again apologizes, returning to his seat with his head held in shame. It's now abundantly clear that the visitor phenomenon is not merely biological, as FEMA claims. There are forces at play that go far beyond human understanding. At night, after the man in the coat leaves, we're visited by a strange old man with a long beard. He says that the mycelium told him about us. Mycelium. That's now the second time we've heard that word, the first being from the psychics. For reference, mycelium can be thought of as the root network of a fungus. It absorbs nutrients, breaks down organic matter, and perhaps most importantly, acts as a vast underground communication system linking fungi and plants together. The old man claims he learned to understand the signals the mycelium sends by studying something called the Book of Smiles. Through it, he heard that something terrible is approaching, the Mushroom Festival, a time when a great mushroom will rise and scatter its spores far and wide, casting a shadow so vast it will swallow the sun itself. He insists that we must stop the festival at all costs, and hands us a torn page from the Book of Smiles to aid us. The wording is cryptic, but still decipherable. In the basement, we find a mushroom growing from one of the potatoes. If we eat it, an apple appears in the living room the next day. Consuming that apple causes a clock to materialize above our bed the following morning. These objects clearly weren't here before, so it's possible the mushroom is inducing hallucinations. In any case, if we set the clock to 12, the old man returns that same night. He thanks us for completing the ritual, but doubts if it was enough to stop the festival. The mushrooms, he says, have been growing far too rapidly, and it seems his fears were justified. For the following night, he returns again, saying the mushroom festival is coming after all. There's too much chaos and malice within the mycelium. We have no choice but to go to Mushroomland, the man says. What follows next borders on the absurd, but beneath the madness lies a deeper meaning. The old man explains that the ritual was meant to remind the mycelium of the bond between humans and mushrooms, humans being represented by the apple, the fruit of a plant. In most cases, mushrooms form symbiotic relationships with plants, sometimes even with the fruits themselves, and the mycelium connecting them sustains both sides. But in certain instances, such as when the host weakens or conditions grow harsh, that relationship turns from mutualistic to parasitic. I believe the mushrooms in this analogy to be symbolic of the visitors, fungi that have begun killing their hosts and spreading without restraint. The ritual failed because, as the old man said, too much malice has already seeped through the mycelium. The connection between fungi and host, between visitors and humanity, has been poisoned by distrust. The balance has collapsed, and the two can no longer coexist. Now the visitors, like the mushrooms, will grow unchecked, consuming everything in their path. But is this ending purely metaphorical, or is there perhaps a more literal meaning? More on that later. For now, it's best we turn the old man away. Getting high and following him to Mushroomland isn't going to solve anything. In the morning, we learn that FEMA has sealed off a neighboring city due to unresolved circumstances. A deliberately vague statement that does nothing but raise suspicions. Surprisingly, there's no new visitor sign today. They must have their hands full with whatever is happening out there. Over the radio, we hear more about the situation from a distressed citizen. He warns that FEMA is shooting anyone who tries to leave the area, so we should avoid the outskirts at all costs. I suppose they forgot to mention that part on TV. As worrying as this news is, we have more immediate problems. The house is completely empty, which means if that pale freak decides to show up again, we're finished. We need people, and urgently. That night, we see groups of survivors gathering around the ruins of our neighbor's house. There are more of them than we expected, and it's unclear where they came from. People are getting desperate as the crisis deepens. Some have already surrendered to despair, others cling hopelessly to the remains of their loved ones. And then there are those who have lost all semblance of sanity. Nearby our house, we spot a man in a long coat, brandishing an assault rifle. But the weapon isn't what concerns us most. It's his necklace, strung together with torn out teeth, eyes, and who knows what else. We hope he doesn't linger around for too long. First to arrive at our doorstep is an older woman who looks completely distraught. She says she's a teacher who tried to give hope to children that had been abandoned. She took in those cast out by their parents out of fear of being visitors, sheltering them in an old kindergarten building. There, she cared for them as best she could until the townsfolk found out. They locked the children inside, nailed the windows shut, and set the building on fire. The teacher was powerless to stop them. All she could do was watch. We let the woman in. Next comes a man on the brink of death, a firefighter who got caught under the midday sun. His body is burnt down to the bone, but he got off lucky compared to his comrades who didn't make it out. With no hospital still operating, he doesn't have long left. The least we can do is give him a place to rest. Last to arrive is the long-haired man from the intro. He carries a stack of documents in his pocket and seems awfully paranoid. The man says that he needs a safe place to continue his research, claiming to possess kilotons of state secrets. According to him, he once worked as a scientist at a research institute, but was fired after making a discovery about the visitors. He insists that it isn't the visitors themselves who are the real threat, but rather what's inside them, brain parasites. It sounds unbelievable, but his story aligns with a recent broadcast. A few days ago, the radio mentioned that a doctor of science was preparing to reveal the truth about the visitors before his research got stolen. This man could very well be him, and seems to have also salvaged a few archives from his former employer. We have no choice but to let him in. This is our first real lead. Tomorrow could very well be the day we unravel the secret of the visitors. Tuning into the news, we learned that one of the city's quarantine zones has come under attack by an armed individual, resulting in the escape of several unverified persons. Could it be that maniac we saw outside our window? He definitely seems like the type, but the radio tells a different story. They say it wasn't a person who attacked the quarantine zone. They saw it. They saw what was there, and that it wasn't human. Returning to the TV, the broadcast suddenly cuts to static and is then interrupted by a new transmission. A cryptic message appears. Silence is the harbinger of death, a sinister quiet that drains the soul. But worse than the emptiness is the ringing, a distant funeral knell growing ever louder. The bell tolls for us all, filling our ears with endless din. Filthy thoughts caught in webs of wax, an infernal nest where visitors thrive, tangled deep in sticky sustenance. A phrase then repeats, cerumen inundans, Latin for overflowing earwax. On screen is an illustration of an ear canal filled with a dark substance. But it can't just be earwax. It extends beyond the eardrum, into the middle and inner ear, possibly even further, perhaps even to the brain. It looks fuzzy and irregular, almost like a fungus. Accompanying the substance are what appears to be tiny insects. After the broadcast returns to normal, we call FEMA to ask about this ear sign, but they seem confused, worried even. They say they'll get back to us, but never do. That information clearly wasn't released by them. Checking in with the scientist, he begins explaining some of the theories contained in the file he recovered from the institute. Visitors aren't real. FEMA are the visitors. Visitors are skinwalkers. None of them sound particularly convincing, and the scientist doesn't believe them either. The only thing he's certain of is that the visitors are caused by brain parasites, and what we just saw on TV is the only truthful broadcast ever aired. By now it's clear, FEMA is hiding the truth from us. All the signs they've identified so far can be possessed by both visitors and humans alike, and there doesn't seem to be any real logic or reasoning behind them. Their findings are based on loose correlation rather than causation. The only sign that appears to be 100% specific to visitors is the visualization of insects crawling out their ears, something that didn't come from FEMA. This doesn't mean that every visitor has this sign, but everyone who does is always a visitor. Now, why is this the case? Well, there happens to be certain types of fungi, specifically parasitic fungi, that can control the bodies of insects and use them to spread their spores. Putting everything together, it seems the biological agent causing the visitor phenomenon is a parasitic fungus that must reach the brain of the host to take effect. The most likely real-world candidate is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, a fungus that forms a network of mycelial threads around the host's brain and body, effectively taking control of it. Typically, this would only work on insects and arthropods, as the fungus wouldn't be able to survive the body temperature of humans and other mammals. But what if, for some reason, global temperatures rose, forcing the fungus to adapt? The temperature was already rising prior to the start of the game, so this theory is certainly plausible, but it still feels like we're missing a piece of the puzzle. A fungus couldn't cause a black hole, it couldn't distort the body, or revive the dead. No, there are certainly more supernatural elements at play here, with the parasitic fungus being only one part of a much larger mystery. Checking our guesses for FEMA's signs now feels like a waste of time, but at the very least, we can still use them to learn more about who they are. The teacher's hands are burned from the fire, she's missing a tooth from where they hit her, and her eyes are red from crying. Her story seems to check out, plus she has no bugs crawling out her ear. The woman is still in a state of grief, unable to comprehend how grown adults could be so easily driven to madness, so willing to kill children. If only FEMA hadn't been so careless with the information they put out, those kids might still be alive. The woman questions who the real monsters are, the creatures who crawl up from the ground, or us. She wonders what will happen if we somehow survive all this, and where she'll fit in within a world full of murderers. She can't abide violence, but she doesn't see any alternative. She has nothing left to offer, and just wants this nightmare to end. It seems those people we saw last night have settled into our neighbor's basement. It's far from ideal, but they're desperate for shelter. As time goes on, people are becoming less and less willing to take in strangers, and given the risk it poses, we can't really blame them. First at our door tonight is another FEMA agent. We can't even tell if it's the same man as before, but once again, they demand more test subjects. We tell the man to bring back the ones they took, but he just dismisses our concerns, saying that the longer we resist and refuse to cooperate, the longer the situation will drag on. He tries to reassure us that FEMA cares about the city, that they're doing everything they can. They just need more time and more people. The man takes both the firefighter and the scientist and leaves, promising he'll bring them back before we know it. But we know better. We'll never see those two again. Next to arrive is the maniac with the assault rifle. We had hoped we'd never have to see his ugly mug up close, but here he is. The man says he's here to clean up the filth, explaining that far too many people are too soft on visitors, too lenient. In his eyes, anyone who feels sympathy for a visitor might as well be one. He's already dealt with his own neighborhood and has now come to deal with ours. Around his neck hangs a necklace made of teeth and other memorabilia from the visitors he's killed, but I'd be willing to bet that many of those came from humans. The man is clearly unhinged, and it's no surprise he's a fan of FEMA. We tell him about the pale man, hoping the two might kill each other off, but he just says there's someone he needs to find first, and that he'll be back later. Last at our door for the night is a very strange man dressed in dark attire. He claims to be a harbinger of a new faith, the leader of a cult that worships death. He believes that death is the only path to salvation, the only way to free us from the chaos that now consumes the world. Notably, he refers to death in the feminine sense, as she or her, and says that death has taken a liking to both us and this house. The man then demands that we give 3 of his underlings shelter while they perform burial rites for the departed. It's a tall order, but we can't really refuse, as the cultist threatens to burn our house to the ground if we don't comply. It's just one psycho after another tonight. We take in the cultists, and they're surprisingly kind and respectful. They only ask that we give them time to complete their ritual. The cultists argue that the public's fear of death is irrational, for she is the kindest of all gods. She brings no famine, no plague, no war. She simply grants rest. They believe our time on this earth has run its course. That's why the sun burns so fiercely now. The visitors' arrival, they claim, was not random. They too were summoned by death, and the land now belongs to them. It's an interesting philosophy, but how much faith can we place in the words of zealots? How can death, an abstract concept, the absence of life, be capable of such things? They speak of death as though she is an actual being, a deity of sorts. If we keep the cultists alive for 3 nights, long enough to finish their ritual, their leader eventually returns. He says that death no longer speaks to him, but he does not lament, for her arrival is nigh. The man then offers to let us join them in their rite, to march towards death and finally find peace. If we accept, the cultists create a large bonfire, tie us to a wooden pole, and set our body alight, allowing the flames to cleanse us of our sins. In our final moments, as our mind drifts in and out of consciousness, we hear a voice echo through the air. It tells us that perhaps some doors are best left closed, but nonetheless, it will preserve our memory and return us to where we were always meant to belong. The ending is vague and mildly unsatisfying. We're left with more questions than answers. There has to be more to it than this. We can't let ourselves die just yet. Declining the cult leader's offer, he says that death will claim her due eventually, and that she spoke to him not long ago. She said she hopes to meet us when the time comes, and may even offer us a place to hide from everything, even from the end itself. Even he isn't sure what she meant by that. On the morning of the 9th day, we learn that due to overcrowding at their own facilities, FEMA has begun housing quarantined individuals in the homes of local residents. On the news, they claim that homeowners are cooperating, but on the radio, we hear a very different story. FEMA is reportedly kicking people out of their own houses to use as quarantine zones. In fact, the group of people taking shelter in the ruins of our neighbor's house are all individuals who were evacuated by FEMA, and it doesn't seem like they're going to last long. Of course, FEMA hides all of this from the public and continues to propagate more nonsense. Another sign, bleeding gums. They advise viewers to turn away anyone displaying this symptom, and the sad part is, most people will. For all their absurd beliefs and rituals, the death cult is at least taking a public stand against FEMA and their disinformation. But unsurprisingly, that's made them a target. Accusations already circulating that they have ties to the visitors, which may or may not be true. That night, we're jolted awake by loud screams and cries echoing from outside the house. It's that armed psycho again. He's holding the group of survivors at our neighbor's house at gunpoint. We want to help them, but it's the middle of the night, and there's only one creature who knocks with such force.
You feel that? Change is haunting you. So am I. And now one of your ilk is deathless. All because of a word. One single word. But what a word it is. You know who I mean. Yes. Strange things happen around you. Must be tough. I'll leave. For now. But before I go, you alone? Well, even we are a rare sight now, let alone your kind, locked in their walls. Change isn't the worst thing coming for you. You don't think I lead the pack, do you? There are far greater things out there. I simply follow orders. Well then, until we meet again.
As usual, the pale man speaks in riddles, but his words carry an uncanny weight. He knows far more about the protagonist than he should, and it would seem that he too is merely another pawn in this game. Next to our door is a woman on the verge of collapse. On her back, she carries the body of her deceased husband, refusing to let go until she can give him a proper burial. She promises not to stay long and just needs a place to rest for a bit. We let her in. Last to arrive is a peculiar red-haired woman. Instead of telling us about her situation or asking for shelter, she begins inquiring about our character's past, his childhood, his upbringing. She then offers to provide a special kind of comfort, something that will help us forget the horrors of this world. If we invite the woman into our home, she stays in our bedroom, even as we sleep, strongly suggesting a sexual relationship. But what's most interesting is what happens at night. While asleep, the woman writhes in pain, and with each passing night, her abdomen grows larger, as though she's undergoing some kind of supernatural pregnancy. By morning, however, her belly returns to normal, and if we question her about it, she just dismisses our concerns, insisting that we're seeing things, that the stress is getting to us. But after the third night, in the morning the woman will lay dead, her abdomen burst open, as if something tore its way out. Notably, this only occurs if the woman happens to be a visitor in that playthrough. Behind the bedroom curtain, we see something moving. Touching it, we hear the cry of a baby. It's unclear whether the child is ours, or if the woman was already pregnant before she arrived. Either way, it's clearly the product of a supernatural union. The child begins scurrying around the house, hiding in all sorts of places. On the ceiling fan, under the bathtub. It's like playing hide and seek. Eventually, at night, the child escapes the house, and through the window, we see it outside, suckling milk from a lactating dog. It shows no bond to the woman who birthed it, only a primal instinct to survive. As we stand there in shock and horror, a thick fog begins to roll in, swallowing everything around us. It feels as if the world itself is about to end. Stepping outside, we feel an unusual presence. The fog continues to spread, muffling all sound. In the distance, we spot some death cultists. They hold the baby in their hands, arguing whether this child will be their salvation or their damnation. They begin yanking the child in opposite directions. Panic overtakes us, and we fire our shotgun blindly. The child is dead. More figures emerge from the fog, one of them resembling the red-haired woman. She calls us a prophet, one who names the sins of the world and leads humanity to salvation. She claims the child would have led us to a kingdom of horror, but by killing it, we prevented that, and now our sacrifice will save them all and usher in the coming of paradise. The cultists carry us away with wooden boards and nails in their hands. Much like the shroom or doom ending, this one is strangely bizarre, yet deeply symbolic. Before the red-haired woman gives birth, she asks us what we would do if there really was a baby. The protagonist hesitates. He's uncertain. She tells him not to be afraid of letting things go, especially when they no longer serve him. Sometimes we cling to something simply because it's familiar, the woman says. And yes, breaking habits hurts, but who knows what it might lead to. I believe this child to be representative of our character's past, everything that keeps him lonely and isolated, his hatred for his father, the loss of his partner, whatever it may be. He clings to these memories because they're familiar, just as he clings to the child that may or may not be his. His past, like the baby, leads to the destruction of those around him, and if he continues to hold on to it, it will inevitably bring about his doom, just as letting the child live would have led to a kingdom of horror. But the protagonist still doesn't understand this. He doesn't realize what the red-haired woman was trying to tell him. He merely killed the child out of panic and luck, and now he's about to be crucified for it. He still has much to learn, and so do we. It's best we turn the red-haired woman away. Before she leaves, she says something peculiar. Do you think facing the end all alone will make things easier? Well, he doesn't think so. There's only one he who seems concerned about whether we're alone or not. So it seems likely that this red-haired seductress is working with the pale man, which raises a disturbing question. Could the pale visitor, in some sick and twisted way, actually be trying to help us? As the sun's activity continues to rise, countries near the equator face devastation, widespread wildfires, droughts. Even stepping outside is enough to cause third-degree burns. Evacuation is no longer an option. But fear not, FEMA has identified another sign. Skin irritation, no explanation, no rationale, just the vaguest description possible. What an absolute joke. They claim the situation in the city is stabilizing after the attack, but as expected, this couldn't be further from the truth. On the radio, we hear that FEMA is trying to keep everything under wraps, jamming communications, silencing witnesses, killing anyone who gets too close. What is it they're trying to hide? Checking in on the widowed woman, we don't even bother testing her for signs, as she's planning to leave this evening. Before she goes, we ask her what happened to her husband. Not too long ago, he hadn't been feeling well and went to the hospital for help. Instead, they redirected him to FEMA. The suits put him in quarantine, promising he'd be released after 3 weeks. But one day, when she went to visit him, all they told her was that he's dead. No explanation, no cause. They wouldn't even let her see the body and refused to let her take him home. But that didn't stop her. She managed to sneak into the morgue, and there she found him. They killed him, she says. His blood is on their hands, and all she can do now is scream. Later that night, we are visited by a FEMA agent for the final time. They're desperate, more so than ever, and we now understand why. The authorities can no longer control the outbreak, and they seem more than ready to blow up the entire city to prevent it from spreading. If FEMA doesn't find a solution soon, everything will be lost. They need more people for their experiments, but we have no one left to give. We're all alone tonight. The agent leaves, never to be seen again. At this point, it's actually possible to join FEMA, but only if we've shown enough initiative by calling their hotline, distributing notices, and complying with their agents. If done so, then on the 10th night, instead of asking for more test subjects, the agent at our door acknowledges our efforts and invites us to join them. They're desperate for people willing to do what needs to be done, and it's not like we have much of a choice. Refuse, and they'll load us into their vehicle themselves. The protagonist then gets a glimpse of how things work on the inside. Long hours, little rest. One moment you're dragging people from their homes, the next you're recruiting them on the spot. We don't know what's become of our home, but it's safe to say we'll never return. From the briefings, it becomes clear that this job was never meant for long-term survival. At least now we understand why all the FEMA agents are so aggressive, why they're always on edge. Their lives are a living hell. Still, that doesn't excuse killing innocents. The crazed vigilante is back. He murdered all those people staying at our neighbor's house, claiming they were visitors. But for him, all it takes to be considered a visitor is one single sign. This sick animal has probably killed more humans than any FEMA agent or visitor. The man asks if we've seen a stocky guy in a blue denim jacket. He's got a kid, a little girl, the man says. He must mean our neighbor. When we tell him what happened, he momentarily hesitates and then reveals that our neighbor was in fact his brother. But instead of mourning, the man begins to insult him, calling him gutless and a coward. He blames this mess on spineless people like him. Then his attention turns to us. He questions whether we might be a visitor and asks us to prove we're human, tightening his grip on the rifle. This is the kind of torment we put our guests through almost every day, staking their lives on things we heard on TV. We show him our hands, and that seems to put the brute at ease. But what if, instead, we showed him our flawless white teeth, or our eyes after drinking some coffee? Well then, the maniac would have pointed his gun at us, forcing us into a standoff. The man screams incoherent vulgarities across the door, and the haze of rage in his eyes feels more terrifying than any visitor. He got us, but it sounds like we got him too. The protagonist mounts the vigilante's corpse and begins bashing his already disfigured face in. He unleashes years of pent-up aggression on the body of a dead man. Then something breaks inside him. Before he bleeds out, he decides to go on a killing spree, taking down any more of these so-called vigilantes with him. It's a rather simplistic ending, but it gives us a closer look at our character's mind and what he's truly capable of. After the encounter, the vigilante leaves, and on his way out, we spot him carrying a gas canister and a Molotov cocktail. We don't even want to think about what he might do next. We just hope we never see him again. It's day 11, and the sun continues to sear the earth beneath it. Scientists warn that if the heat doesn't subside soon, meltwater from the polar ice caps could trigger catastrophic flooding. Even after all this time, they still have no idea what's causing this unprecedented climate anomaly. Adding more fuel to the fire is FEMA, who have announced yet another visitor sign: fungal growth in the armpits. At first, you might assume this relates to the parasitic fungus responsible for the visitor infection, but it doesn't. Like every other sign identified by FEMA, this one can also occur in ordinary humans. Even the protagonist can develop a rash after a few days, though it clears almost immediately after washing. A parasitic brain fungus wouldn't typically cause a rash, and if it did, it certainly wouldn't remain surface deep. A more likely explanation is that due to the rising humidity, we're seeing an increase in benign fungal infections like tinea or candida. But it's the end of the world. Very few people are thinking rationally anymore. Over the radio, we hear a troubling transmission. A voice says that FEMA shouldn't have burned the bodies because that's what draws it. If they'd left the remains alone, it wouldn't have come. This is the second time we've heard mention of this it, the first being the attack on the quarantine zone. Is this the calamity the prophet spoke of? Could this be what FEMA is trying to hide? Later that night, we meet someone who claims to have seen it face to face, and the mere sight of the creature caused the man to tear out his own eyes. Yet even blind, the dread it instilled remains burned into his mind. The only thing we've encountered that comes close to this description is the pale man, but this person nearly laughs at the comparison. It is far greater, far stronger. It cannot be named, and it follows the scent of burning flesh to reap what we've sown. Curious to learn more about this unspeakable being, we let the blind man in. Up next, a man wearing a FEMA uniform appears at our door, though he lacks the respirator. He insists that he's not actually a part of FEMA, just someone who took the uniform of a corpse. They must wear these things for a reason, the man says. Odd, but he looks harmless enough. We let him in. The air is thick with dread tonight. Our neighbor's brother has set the whole neighborhood ablaze. Screeches echo in the distance, and the scent of charred flesh fills the air. Everything feels like it's coming to an end. Even the cultists are preparing to leave this world behind and finally meet their beloved deity. Perhaps we should have taken them up on their offer.
They told me this would be our last little chat. Everything is coming to an end, either by our hands or your own. Do you feel it? Death creeping closer and closer. It's breathing down your necks already.
With this being our last encounter, we finally work up the courage to ask the pale man why he keeps coming here and why he doesn't just break the door down.
You only now just thought to ask that? Have you considered that you were chosen? They send me for a reason, to change something, but the outcome's always the same. You'll die. If not today, then tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then later. You will disappear. So, you alone? Still can't take matters into your own hands, eh? Don't worry, that's why I'm here. You are ready.
The pale man leaves, never to be seen again. He says that we are ready, but we are still not sure for what. It's been 12 days since the government declared a state of emergency, and things have only worsened. The glaciers are now melting, causing sea levels to rise at an alarming rate. Hope is all but lost. And yet, FEMA continues its charade, announcing another visitor sign, as if that's going to solve anything. Rapid pupil movement, that's the best they could come up with. Thankfully, this might be the last bit of disinformation these careless reporters ever spread. The news station claims they're at risk of an imminent attack, then abruptly end the broadcast. Good riddance. After inspecting the fake FEMA agent's ears for insects, we begin questioning him about his supposed background. And now his story changes. He says he found the suit in a car, but last night, he told us he took it off a corpse. Pressing him further, we ask him if he isn't worried about getting in trouble for impersonating a FEMA officer. The man insists that he should be able to explain his way out of it, which seems like more than wishful thinking. Finally, we ask to search his pockets. The man panics, but with a bit of force, we find his FEMA ID. The weasel lied. He's part of FEMA after all, or at least he used to be. Following an incident where a widow came looking for her husband who died in quarantine, he lost his job for breaking protocol. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This man was likely involved in the death of that woman's husband. He claims that, contrary to her story, he was the one who handed over the body, but the man has already proven himself untrustworthy. He then goes on to denigrate the widow and callously says that he should have just shot her like he did her husband. The worm claims he had no choice, that her husband was a visitor, but according to FEMA standards, anyone damn well could be. We'd like nothing more to shoot the murderer ourselves, but that would make us no different from him. We tell the man to leave come nightfall and leave things there. Speaking to the blind man, it's clearly apparent that he wasn't lying about his story. He refuses to even describe what he saw out of concern for our own sanity, but says he takes solace in knowing he'll never have to see that monstrosity again, though it still sometimes haunts his dreams. He fears it may have been etched into his very being, that he'll never truly escape it. The man's tone then darkens as he realizes that awake or asleep, it will tear us apart. We will all burn, he says. We will all die. Nothing matters anymore. The man asks to be left alone. Over the radio, we hear a transmission directed to all FEMA units. They are instructed to immediately stop burning bodies and instead use lime, as incineration has failed to contain the threat posed by the subject. Lime likely refers to quicklime or calcium oxide, which has historically been used to accelerate the decomposition of corpses. From earlier transmissions, we know burning flesh seems to attract this entity, so that method is no longer viable. But what's most interesting is FEMA's terminology, referring to it as the subject. That could imply that they've been researching or studying this creature for some time. It's even possible they played a role in its creation, though I find that unlikely. From the way the blind man described it, this thing could only be the product of something far beyond our understanding. Looking out our window that night, we notice something strange. The burnt bodies of those killed by the vigilante, they're all gone. nothing remains. Their flesh and bones have vanished entirely, as if something devoured them. We fear the worst and almost hesitate to check the other windows. But curiosity gets the better of us. Behind two clueless FEMA agents, something moves in the shadows. A shapeless mass that was never meant to be seen. It. Very little is known about this creature, as the game only makes sparse mention of it. But there is one other instance where we encounter it. If we let enough visitors into our house and fail to stop them from killing a certain number of humans, we will experience a strange dream. The Steam achievement for this is titled Walk a Mile in Their Shoes, but the internal API name is called Body Eater. We know that it not only devours corpses, but also has the ability to invade dreams. In this dream, we take control of the entity. It crawls through the house, growling and snarling. One by one, it enters each room, devouring everyone inside, all except us. When we regain control of the protagonist, every door has been broken down, and by morning, all the guests are gone without a trace. It's fascinating. Is it simply drawn to our house because of the bodies? Or is this a symbolic punishment for our inaction, a representation of what happens when we continue to run from our problems? Whatever the case is, we pray we never see that thing again. Our house seems to be the only one left standing in the neighborhood. That madman did exactly what we feared. It's infuriating, unfair even. Why do we get to live when so many others have died? Why have we been chosen, and by what? It's a wonder there are still people roaming about at this stage, still fighting to survive. We'll help them if we can. First to arrive is an old man in a white coat. A surgeon, or at least he was. With the hospital shut down, he can't work, so now he wanders, helping wherever he can. We let the doctor in. Last for the night is a very peculiar man searching for his daughter. He says that they were just passing through the city when everything began to spiral. The heat caused him to pass out, and when he awoke, she was gone. The man promises not to stay long, saying that he only needs to hide until FEMA loses his trail. Apparently, they're after him because he knows the secret of the visitors, which he's willing to share with us if we let him in. A tempting offer, one we can't refuse. We wake to a troubling broadcast. An unidentified voice simply and calmly states that FEMA have arrested a majority of government officials under suspicion of being visitors and will now assume the role of interim government. A painfully obvious coup. Could this have been their plan from the very beginning? The broadcast ends with an unnerving directive. Lock your doors and barricade your windows until further notice. On the radio, we hear that FEMA has failed to contain the subject. It has now escaped the city perimeter, ready to unleash more carnage. We head to the kitchen to tell the blind man, but instead, we find his limp body hanging from the ceiling. The terror was too much. May he rest in peace. The doctor tells us that following the outbreak, FEMA shut down all hospitals and transferred the patients to their quarantine zones. The doctor wanted to keep helping people, so he naively volunteered to work at these facilities. There he saw how FEMA truly operated. No one was ever told how the visitor signs were identified or what they were supposed to mean, only to enforce them. They were given a checklist, he says, and functioned more like border guards stamping papers than actual doctors. He immediately recognized the absurdity of it all and began falsifying reports, trying to help people escape. But one day, after a close call with the facility guard, he couldn't bear to stay any longer. He ran. The guilt still haunts him. He wishes he'd been braver, that he'd stayed and saved more people from FEMA. It seems there are still good people left in this world. Sadly, they're few and far between. The man in the sweater is perhaps the most interesting character in the entire game. His real name is Jakob, and he's actually a character from the developer's upcoming game, Lost in the Roots, which happens to take place in the same universe as No, I'm Not a Human. Jakob claims that he and the protagonist are immortal, though not in the traditional sense. He believes that after death, we reincarnate and live again, only to die once more, trapped in a continuous cycle of death and rebirth. This is likely a reference to the nature of video game characters, who are forced to die and respawn endlessly. Regarding the visitors, Jakob claims that they originated from the outskirts of town, where he once lived, and that they've been around for at least 2 years now. The most infuriating part, he says, is that FEMA already knew. They knew about the visitors and the danger they posed, yet they still allowed them into the city, all so they could launder money from the government. He insists that everything FEMA says on the TV is a lie, something we already suspected, and that FEMA is worse than any visitor. In fact, Jakob believes the visitors are just like us, and are equally entitled to the land we share. Though that last part may be somewhat biased, given that Jakob himself is a visitor. Still, he makes some compelling points, especially when we consider his own game. In the demo for Lost in the Roots, Jakob tells his daughter that the forest where they live is both alive and dangerous, warning that it brings strange creatures into being. The monsters in his game are far more grotesque than the visitors, but they could very well be related. In other words, this mysterious forest Jakob speaks of may be the birthplace of the parasitic brain fungus. Perhaps we'll learn more when the full game releases. For now, Jakob must leave. He needs to find his daughter as soon as possible. Strange thing for a visitor to say, but maybe he's right. Maybe the visitors, or at least some of them, aren't so different from us after all. That night, when we go to check the door, no one comes. There's either no one left out there, or they've all taken FEMA's advice and barricaded themselves inside. Either way, it's probably best we do the same. Things are only going to get worse from here on out. In the morning, we barricade all our windows, and along with the remaining guests, head down into the basement. At this point, if you have allowed any visitors into your home, they'll wait until you are most vulnerable before striking, tearing your frail body limb from limb. Fortunately, we were careful with who we let in. There are no visitors here. By rationing our supplies, we managed to survive for about 2 months, after which we hear a transmission over the radio. With summer coming to an end, solar activity has begun to fade. Scientists predict that in just a few days, it may finally be safe to go outside. Despite the good news, the protagonist feels disappointed. He wonders how long this will all go on, how long he'll have to live under the shadow of the visitors and the sun. The thought of waiting for the end feels suffocating. He can't help but question whether he made the right choice. We now arrive at what I believe to be the true ending of the game, or at the very least, the one that ties everything together. To achieve it, we must heed the bold prophet's words and refrain from testing our guess for 2 days yonder. We must put aside our paranoia and distrust and let fate take its course. If we do so, the man returns, dirty, disheveled, and more withered than before. He says his foresight is fading, though it's probably not because of us or her. He wonders if it has something to do with the Mushroom Man, as he now sees visions of newly grown stalks breaking through the ash and reaching for the sky. Despite his clouded sight, the prophet directs us to the basement. He says there's something down there, buried beneath the soil, but that we shouldn't jump just yet. He needs more time to gather his thoughts. Heading down into the basement, we now have the option to dig into the exposed soil. Doing so 3 times reveals an entrance to a massive underground tunnel system. Through a crack in the wall, we spot what looks like a person, a miner. He says that he and a few others had planned to dig tunnels to escape the heat, but to their surprise, someone had already done it. A vast network stretching far beyond the soil beneath our house. The man suspects the tunnels were made by visitors, which would explain how they were able to move around so efficiently. But their most disturbing discovery wasn't the tunnels themselves. It was the strange hole in the ground that emits a constant low hum. Animals go silent near it, compasses break, and flashlights can't penetrate its darkness. The miner warns us to stay far away from it, and for now, we do. 2 more days pass, and on the 12th night, the Prophet pays us a visit one final time. He looks to be on the brink of death, barely able to see. He says that his foresight is gone, that he can no longer guide us. Only one word remains in his mind, repeating endlessly, though he's unsure whether it's meant for him or for us. Jump. The Prophet seems lost, uncertain of what to do next. He asks us to divine his fortune, just as we did when we first met him. This time, we turn to a passage near the end of the book. We've been on a train to nowhere for the longest time, but the road roars on beneath its wheels. How morbidly relevant, yet the words seem to comfort him. He says he's remembered something, then turns and takes his leave. Returning to the underground tunnel system, we find that a previously blocked path has now opened, allowing us to finally see the hole the miners spoke of. The man who once seemed so full of energy now sits motionless, like a statue, as if life has already left his body. The hole itself is ominous, a pitch-black opening into the void. There's no telling how deep it goes, or whether we'll survive the fall. But heeding the Prophet's final message, we let go of our fear and jump. We're transported to somewhere beyond reality, a seemingly endless ocean beneath the starry night sky. It's tranquil, inexplicably so. At the center of this place drifts an otherworldly presence, a glowing cloud-like being, Death. We finally meet her. She tells us not to be afraid, for fear has no meaning in this place. All suffering has ended, and a long, peaceful eternity awaits. We ask the entity if we are dead, to which she responds with a question of her own. What does it truly mean to be dead? Maybe, she says, we simply fell asleep and found each other within a dream. Death then asks where we want to go. To those who carved marks into your heart, no, she says, you don't want to see them. I know where you want to go. The entity sends us to that place from the poster, a lone pink house in the middle of nowhere. It's what the protagonist always wanted. It's calm, it's still. There's nothing left to hinder us here, no one left to bother us. We don't know how we got here, we don't know how to leave, but we don't really want to. We're tired, and we just want to rest. Now that we've covered all the endings and met every major character, let's try to put everything together. At its core, No, I'm Not a Human is a game about death, and almost everything within it, whether symbolic or literal, is bound to her. Take the sun for instance. The Cashier tells us that the sun heralds the final approach, that together we shall welcome death. The death cultists echo this belief, claiming that she is the reason the sun burns so fiercely. The scientists, for all their instruments and data, fail to explain the anomaly because the cause isn't scientific at all, it's supernatural. The visitors follow the same pattern. On the surface, their existence can be traced to a parasitic fungus, something biological and explainable, but beneath that layer lies something else entirely. It was death who created the conditions for the organism to thrive, and death who turned a natural infection into something beyond comprehension. A fungus alone couldn't revive the dead. It can't mangle the human form. It can't create that. Perhaps the fungus serves as a conduit, a biological medium through which death extends her influence. Whatever the mechanism is, one thing is certain: every visitor abides by death's will. Some are just further along in the process than others. The pale man hints at this truth when he says that the pack is led by something far greater, that he merely follows orders. The cat lady echoes this too, claiming that she was sent to our house by a certain someone, and that she will eventually come for us. So why is death doing all this? Why the burning sun, the plague of visitors? and the collapse of civilization. While the cultists believe it's because humanity's time on this earth has ended, the visitors in their eyes are not an invasion, they're a reclamation, another vehicle for returning us to the great beyond, along with the sun. This land belongs to the visitors now, they say. Dogs rule the world, and only dogs survive here. Among the many characters we encounter, there are a few whom death seems to favor more than others. She speaks directly to the death cult leader and the bold prophet. She grants ungodly strength to the pale man, but there's one person in the story who shares a deeper connection with her than anyone else. Us. Have you ever wondered why the visitors never attack us until the very end? Why the pale man never breaks down our door? Why even that ravenous corpse-eating entity leaves us untouched? The characters have been hinting at the answer all along. Death has taken a liking to you. Your bond with death is tighter than any of ours. You were chosen. Our character's connection to death isn't coincidence. It's personal, and I believe it's tied to his past. We know that the protagonist had a difficult childhood. He despised his father, hated this house, and even prayed for both to burn. These aren't casual remarks. They suggest a life steeped in trauma. The cultists also remark that not only is the protagonist bound to death, but that the house itself is as well. Death lingers in these walls, intangible yet suffocating. The naked concrete reeks of old blood. In the "No, I'm not a murderer" ending, shadowy arms burst from the basement floor, a visual manifestation of guilt clawing its way to the surface. Whatever lies buried down there, literally or metaphorically, is something the protagonist can't escape, something that continues to eat at him. We know the protagonist is someone who is capable of violence, especially when pushed to his limit, so perhaps it isn't far-fetched to imagine that he killed his own father, a man he both feared and loathed. Whatever the case is, as a result of their strong connection, death actually sends her agents to help the protagonist overcome his dark past and finally move on. First is the pale man. Every time he visits, he asks the same question: are you alone? If we are, or if we lie, he kills us. It's a deceptively simple test, but an important one. It forces the protagonist to open his door to others, to let people in, and to stop isolating himself out of fear and guilt. The pale man isn't just a monster, he's a teacher, albeit an insanely cruel one. Recall that he once said, as a result of a single word, we have made one of our ilk deathless. I believe this word to be alone, and the one made deathless to be our father. By refusing to let go of his past, by clinging to hatred and grief, the protagonist has immortalized his father's memory. Even in death, the man still haunts him. This is precisely why the pale man was sent, to change something within us, to force us to let others in, because we cannot take matters into our own hands. The second agent of death is the seductive woman. Her connection to death isn't as explicit as the others, but it's certainly there. She seems to work alongside the pale man, knowing far more about us than she should. Moreover, she tells us not to fear death, and her ending can only be achieved if she herself is a visitor, meaning she's subservient to death's will. Like the pale man, she tries to guide the protagonist towards change, but while he teaches him to open up, she teaches him to let go. Her message is clear: not everything we cling to deserves to be kept. Yet the protagonist fails to understand this lesson. He still clings to the child, the embodiment of his past, and only kills it out of panic. The result is a slow, painful end. The last and perhaps most important agent of death is the bold prophet. Alongside the cat lady and her feline companion, the prophet helps the protagonist confront what he kept buried, both literally and metaphorically. He pushes him to dig into the basement, to uncover the secrets he's tried to hide beneath the foundation of that cursed house. He teaches him to surrender, to stop trying to control fate, and to stop resisting death's will. By convincing him to stop testing guess and to finally jump, the prophet leads him towards acceptance. And that's what makes this ending different. As you may have noticed, all the endings share one thing in common. We die, either immediately or later down the line. We bleed out, we burn to death, we are ripped apart, we are strangled, we are crucified, we are sacrificed, or perhaps we slowly wither away, miserable and discontent. Even the pale man acknowledges this. I am sent to change something, he says, but the outcome's always the same. You'll die. What matters then is not if or when we die, but how. Only by facing our past, by accepting the truth, and by surrendering ourselves to death, can we find peace. In the true ending, the protagonist doesn't fight or flee. He lets go, and in doing so, he reaches something close to enlightenment. Every other ending is a variation of denial or ignorance. But by facing death directly, by looking her in the eyes, we may have been granted a place to hide from the end itself. Whatever the truth is, the message that No, I'm Not a Human is sending is clear. Death is inevitable, and only by embracing it can we find true peace. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring the video. You can play the game for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox or mobile by using the links down below. New and returning players on PC and consoles will receive a special bonus pack for a limited time only. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. Thank you to all my patrons for your continued support. Until next time, take care everyone.